today I am going to be checking out this book. It's got a little bit of protective plastic on it, so I apologize if it's too crinkly. This is a book that a friend of mine got who loves things that are of the 30s and 40s. This is American Women Poets, 1937. And something that you will find that surprised me is how many of them have to do with work. The thing that surprised me, if you touch the ink, you can actually feel it raised on the page. Because most I don't know what types it in. Instead of like today where it just goes right into the page. So let's take a look. I apologize for the traffic, it's very busy. So here, let's start with a nice satire. It's called 23rd Psalm, Revised Version. The Lord is my shepherd, you must not want, or simulate desire for bread. You are the congregation of the Lord, and each one will be fed. On prayers, a pontiff or a priest what matter? Man is no higher than his stomach, and no fatter. The Lord prepares a table in the presence of your enemies, and enemies eat. But fear no evil, they have only meat. You will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. A lot of these just kind of crack me up. The world's wrong. To make a million, for what good? Big business plays the thief and pauperizes human lives, our country's grief. While gangsters from the underworld lie lurking close at hand, ready to pounce upon his child and gold for blood demand. Makers of implements of death must have a little coin, and so they scare the world to war, and they do not have to join. They do not have to join. To gratify a few men's greed for land at any cost, a million secret homes are wrecked, and countless lives are lost. Justice again will stalk the land, her cold and glaring eye will seek out every hiding place where life exploiters lie. In business, politics, and war, dens of iniquity, she has been far too kind to those who slay humanity. I sometimes read old poetry and wonder if rhymes don't quite work nowadays because we pronounce them differently. What did people say? Humanity? I don't know. Poverty. Poverty is not a lack of money. Poverty is a lack of appreciation, of beauty, of poetry, of motion. Poverty is an inability to be funny. Poverty is a dearth of ideals, of anticipation, of joy, of humor and ambition. Poverty is lack of mind areas. Away with gloom about depressions, laugh, love, lift to glory beguiling arts that put fears to rout and change people to overcome all their obsessions. I probably should be reading the authors too. This one was Lottie B. Neal. And The World's Wrong was Faith E. Packard. And the satire, 23rd Psalm, is P. Earl. This one's by Edith Marion Marcom. From a Factory. These are the days of my youth, when I must be free, free to stride upon the clear-aired hills, and through the gentleness of green valleys, I must lie beneath the stars until they prick through my flesh and gleam from my eyes, and the moon shall glide over me, while the clouds shall be ever a miracle. These walls were not made for such as I, these roofs that cringe and cramp, and the dullness of weary lungs and eyes and hearts, not for me nor any other creature, hands ever busy making, carrying, never for a moment tranquil, shaping a foolish mass that passes by unnoticed, an emptiness made from life and wasted in a moment. Yet coins must be earned for bread, for mouths that must eat before a soul can dream. Is it vain, the toil? Why have we done this thing? Sunlight weakly enters through the stained glass. We know the sky must be blue, though we see it not, and there must be music, though we hear only noise, noise that remains with us when we play and rest. I think of you, far home I once knew. The hills were kind to you, and so the night. In the spring, oh, the colors of the tulip and wild rose, and the perfumed mantles of the fields and orchards. Who has seen anything like unto a meadow brimmed with buttercups, like unto white, dripping branches of the locust tree? Such as these we love, and from such as these we strive to keep away, fearing lest they soften our greed and make us weak to beauty. For then we might forget our loved ones' needs, that we must earn for them. We might be led to lie in the dearness of living grass and look contented at the sky, as perhaps we were meant to do. Bleak. I know there were some that were very funny, but in a dark humor sort of way. I don't mean funny in like a, sort of way. I'm just wandering around through the book. I like reading the shorter ones because I feel like sometimes I guess I just look at the long ones and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's so much to read, which I probably shouldn't feel like. There's a lot of these about Russia. All Night Sleepless after the bombing of Madrid. This one's by Bernice Brown Bettman. All night sleepless I heard the sounds of mourning, heard the prayers, the pleadings, the supplications. Lovers they were, and mothers. Oh, the wailing and weeping, sorrow unending. All night sleepless I heard the sound of waves breaking, breaking upon no shore where no pity is. Saw the drowned ones tossing, souls of all who had perished, anguish unspoken. There were stars, brilliant dewdrops in heaven, shining as on the nights of Plutarch and Plato, over the hills of Dante, over the heart of Milton. Hells of Dante, that makes more sense. Strong and implacable. There were the winds blowing, the strong winds that thundered. Oh, I'm not going to pronounce this correctly. Over Mytilene, over Pompeii, over the Trojans, saw the poets Homer, Virgil, and Shelley, heard the lute playing. Oh, the music, the singing, the beauty undying. Oh, the courage, the longing, man's upward striving, brotherhood, peace. They have said, oh, the spirit, deathless, eternal. All night sleepless I heard the sounds of mourning, the hungry, the old, the dreamers, end and beginning. Saw the waves break on no shore, saw the foam perish, go under, heard not the answer. I don't think it was, wow, it's really noisy today. I don't think in 1937 it was particularly happy times, but let's see if I can find a funnier one. This one's about a cat. Maybe it'll be happy. By Grace Jacobs. Cat on the doorstep. On a step before a cottage door, a joyous store of Chinese bread, a black cat crouching stared at me. He turned his scornful, haughty head. To watch me down the darkening street, his baleful golden green eyes glared. Perhaps I'd waked him from a dream of Egypt's glories he once shared. I used to have a cat who I think felt like that. This one's called Our Dog, D-A-W-G, by May Brian Kaiser. I have to warn you, I'm really bad at pronouncing words. There he lays, a-sleepin' like a log, just an ordinary flea-bit, no-account hound dog. Them ears hissin', kiverin' his face. When supper's on, he takes his regular place at the fur end of the festive board, and wags his tail, not to and from, but up and down, so's he's seen and heard. When the moon seems full enough to burst, he breaks our sleep, making mournful howls. When strangers come, he licks their hands. Once he barked an hour into a holler trunk. We thought he treed a possum, but 'twas a cussed skunk. He has his faults, we are uster, having him round, and the children kinter cotton to that pesky lop-eared hound. The thing about the 1930s is I have no clue if this is like, what is it called? Appropriating other cultures, or if this is like actually of someone of that culture. It's really hard to tell. I know my boss did a lot of research on Amos and Andy and talked about how it took a couple of white guys talking about African Americans having romantic relationships in order for that to become appropriate, because they kind of weren't allowed to have any sort of sexuality portrayed in media before, and that would be like the 1930s. It was just seen as inappropriate. This one about the indigo bunting. I was reading the indigo bunting recently. It's a book about a fellow who knew Edna Siemens in Malay. It's a type of bird. It's kind of cool. You can even feel on the pictures the raised ink. I should have picked a different room for this. This is so loud. Oh, maybe I should pick a different whole section. Let's see, this one's about for lovers of gardens and trees. There's one called Narcissus, which I'm going to read because I find it kind of interesting, the whole Greek myth where there's like a nymph who's really into Narcissus, and then he sees his reflection and she thinks he's really into her because she's a water nymph, but instead he's just looking at his reflection in her, and then he just withers away and dies because he's so obsessed with himself he forgets to eat. And I think it's interesting that, you know, we now use that word narcissism all the time, and for a while I used to use it a lot because I was kind of a weird kid who liked to read Greek myths in my free time when I was little. Rachel Louise Pollock, Narcissus. Curled in a ball you are nothing, until I shall put you in water, and cradle you in pebbles, and watch lest too great heat or cold shall hurt you. Strange flower, that such contentment should be yours, who have never known the kissing wind, nor stray seed that clings for shelter. But when your day of blossoming is over, back shall you creep into your brown shell, and wait for me to say the word that means a bowl, some water, and a handful of pebbles. I think they're talking about the narcissus flower, actually, so I should probably find out what that looks like. Sounds like it's curled in a ball until it's put in water and then flower. Garden Thoughts. This one's by Evelyn Dorio. It's got 2 parts. Part 1 is called Life-Giving. Once I lifted a rain-soaked woodblock from the yellowed face of the earth and watched each morn the sickly imprint heal smooth and tender with grass blades until it was inches grown and wind whistling through it. Then I knew how God feels. That's interesting. The second one's called First Seedling. First there was 1, then 3 and 5, and now so many, all rooted in the mother soil, and soon to bud and bloom. Then yellow flowers and purple too will touch the rim of a bubble vase. But I'll always think how the first one looked in the mist of dawn when it was born. 2 little green wings half open, showing out of damp earth, like a tiny wet bird that had stayed out all night. I can kind of see that. There would be a little tiny plant, and then the 2 little wings come out. When I did a bean experiment as a little homeschooled kid, I took pictures at each stage. I was thinking it might be fun to try something different a little bit. See if I can get this out. So this is another book that my boss got for me. This is actually really interesting. This is, let's see, Marjorie Hillis. She wrote Live Alone and Like It back in the 30s, and they recently reprinted it, so this is actually brand new. But this is one of the originals, so unfortunately I don't have a dust jacket. But inside, this is gonna go the way of the dodo, soon. Right here, a lot of people are quite bitter. She quits living alone and likes it. She was an editor for Vogue, and she wrote about being a single woman. She worked for Vogue for 20 years, and then she met this fellow in her 40s and got married, and they were like, no, how dare you? Okay, so this, yeah, it's already falling apart, I'm afraid. This was in fairly decent condition when I first got it, but I probably should, like, find some way of covering it. But, let's see, does this go to this? Maybe it's this little strip here. Yes. It says, New York, June 23rd. Marjorie Hillis wrote Live Alone and Like It a year ago, is no longer going to live alone and like it. The young woman whose book helped numerous unmarried girls endure living alone announced Friday she's going to marry Thomas Henry Ralston of Brooklyn, president of a chain of grocery stores. Which, actually, I don't think is that terrible, because even in Live Alone and Like It, she doesn't, like, the very opening is like, this isn't written to advocate for living single. It's just, you know, every once in a while in your life, you're probably going to be living alone. I think that the sequel book, Orchids on Your Budget, or if you buy the new version, I think it's called Bubbly on Your Budget. Or at least I found a copy. I think she's just hilarious in this. There's this chapter 4, Can You Afford a Husband? And it's so tongue-in-cheek. It says, well, can you? A lot of women do, and support them nicely on a small salary at that. And why not, if they want to? It may be an extravagance, but even periods of strict economy should include some extravagances if possible. The best planned budgets are not those that are the most drably practical, they're the ones that give the budgeteers the best run for their money. One of the things that has made economy so unpopular is that people are apt to practice it with grim determination. Too many economizers, in our opinion, go in for keeping up a front, with only the bare necessities behind the front. I love this. All in caps, keeping up a front. I have a friend who does that, even in like texting. It just cracks me up. We are all for taking down the front and using its upkeep to get the most fun out of living. I also love these little images here, like, this is like supposed to be the husband. Little Cupid. One of the most popular narcotics to ease the pain of economy is cherishing the belief that better days are ahead. This is both efficacious and commendable, but it sometimes turns out to be a habit-forming drug. The addicts keep pushing off their spending days, which is bad for their dispositions and hard on their family and friends. Even during emergencies, when you need the dose, you shouldn't take it in large enough quantities to dull the consciousness that your better days may be too far ahead to be of much use to you. Things which you look forward to long are almost invariably disappointing when you get them, and you might die first anyway. Yeah, I like the way that she speaks to women. I think that she has almost a sister-like way of talking to women, and it's very, like, it's very uncompromising. She's just incredibly like here, for instance, this is hilarious. I don't know if you can see that because I don't have a viewfinder or anything. Let me see. So as you can see, it says sex, sex, sex on all the books. And this chapter 8, will you or won't you? Question. Is it true that the attitude towards the morals of women on their own has changed so much in the last 20 years that it is no longer considered wrong for an unattached woman to have an affair? That is, do really nice women have them? And she is talking about having an unmarried, like, you know, affair. I like to think of this as maybe having a, I don't know, because if you're keeping your own house and you're not moving in with a fellow, affair, I don't know. I think of like an affair as, nowadays if you're living with someone for a long enough time, you're seen as in a common law marriage anyway, so I'm thinking kind of like an uncommitted sort of affair, even though back then it probably just meant unmarried. Answer. If you're hoping that we are going to tell you to go as far as you like so that the responsibility won't be on your own shoulders, you are in for a disappointment. This is every woman's own special problem which nobody can settle. The one thing your best friend really won't tell you is whether or not she is what once was known as a good woman. It's also in caps. Good woman. There is nothing about which people are so vulnerable as chastity applied to the other person, or so reticent as chastity applied to themselves. Whether or not a woman has had her moments, if she has a grain of common sense, she keeps it to herself, since she has most people would be shocked, and if she hasn't, the rest would be superior. It would be foolish to pretend that things are as they used to be. Wow. However, a woman's honor is no longer mentioned with bated breath and protected by her father, her brother, and the community. It is her own affair. So, yeah, I like this too. So many volumes have been written on the sex life of the unmarried woman in the last 20 years, and so many thousands of cases listed that if you waded through them, you would emerge feeling that you were the sole surviving virgin. This too would be far from the truth, since recently the burden of the song was that a little sex life wasn't such a bad idea. Lately, the tune has changed, investigation over a longer period of years having apparently caused the startling discovery that the woman pays. I feel like, in a way, that's still true. I mean, you either pay by being more susceptible to STDs than men, or pay by getting pregnant, or, you have to pay for birth control. If you're gonna do the pill. As you are probably used to paying for everything from the rent to your own pearls, we don't expect the statement to stop you from having your fling. What you probably want to know is, how much does she pay, and is it worth it? She pays, as a matter of fact, in a great many ways, in 1,000 little shabbinesses and humiliations, in the almost inevitable bitter ending, and in nervous wear and tear. She also, if she is wise, goes right on paying her own personal expenses. Yeah. Living alone, she has, of course, one advantage over other women, but also one added temptation, a lack of privacy, being more responsible for upholding the morals of the nation than anything short of the Bible. No minister, doctor, or scientist has ever had the restraining influence of a good, healthy fear that the father or older sister might barge in. Certainly, affairs should not even be thought of before you are 30. Once you have reached this age, if you will not hurt any third person and can take all that you have to take it silently, with dignity, with a little humor, and without any weeping or wailing or gnashing of teeth. Perhaps the experience will be worth it to you, or perhaps it won't. Of course, she's not against getting married. She's just talking about, in the examples, she gives little examples at the end of every chapter. She talks about women who have affairs, and with married men. Is there any reason why a woman should not entertain her men friends at dinner, or occasionally invite them out to be her escorts when she